Welcome to Season 3 of Students of Mind, the podcast that's all about opening up and normalizing discussions about mental health in ways that anyone can comprehend. In the first 2 seasons, we sat down with mental health experts and survivors to give you a full circle picture of each topic. In this new season, we will continue to explore the world of mental health through the insights of experts, healers, and individuals with lived experience. From alternative healing modalities to living with multiple illnesses, this season we will cover a wide range of topics with the help of a diverse selection of guests. My name is Jayde, and for today's episode, we will be taking a look at borderline personality disorder. Joining us for this conversation is Dr. Ali and my lovely friend Isabella. I hope by listening to the show, you're able to learn something new and gain some encouragement through hearing our experts and listening to the journeys of our guests. However, this show is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your mental health professional or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have about your condition. Never disregard professional advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on the Students of Mind podcast. Today's first guest is Dr. Ali Mattu. Dr. Ali is a clinical psychologist and cognitive behavioral therapist specializing in anxiety disorders. Dr. Ali received his BA from the University of California, Los Angeles, and his PhD in clinical psychology from the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. He is a former assistant professor at the Columbia University Irving Medical Center in New York City. Currently, Dr. Ali is on the board of directors of The Story Collider and creates mental health content for his YouTube channel called The Psych Show. Dr. Ali has been an expert featured in several TV shows, documentaries, and other types of media. So welcome, Dr. Ali. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Me too. Super excited. I think this will be a great conversation. But before we get into the topic of today, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do?
Yeah, so I am a clinical psychologist. My focus has been in treating anxiety and anxiety-related disorders. But I've done a lot of stuff is related to anxiety, and I've kind of stumbled into learning how to treat a lot of other types of problems that are kind of related to that stuff. So I was a full-time assistant professor at Columbia University. From there, I sort of started making YouTube content, trying to share what I know, making mental health a little bit easier to understand. Since then, I've kind of left that world and I've done a lot of different things. Most recently, I was at a mental health startup. So I've kind of been doing a lot of different stuff, but my main focus now is to try to share what I know with as many people as I can in as many mediums and formats, and trying to really get mental health out there and make it easily accessible, which I know is kind of one of the goals that you have here on this podcast too, which is why I was excited to join you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it sounds like we're very aligned, so It's really cool to hear that you're doing this work, you know, as like a professional in the field. That's really great to hear.
Yeah, well, I started doing it because there weren't, at the time when I started my YouTube channel, that was back in 2015, there weren't too many other people doing that kind of work. And it started out of me wanting to have good quality content in terms of the information, but also good quality in terms of making it fun and like watchable, having this content to share with my clients, share with the families I work with. And there just wasn't a ton of that out there. And so my wife's like, well, you can make that. And I'm like, no, I can't. You can't just like make content for YouTube. And she's like, what do you think YouTube is? That's all it is. So that's kind of how all that got started.
Very cool. That's a great story. So, yeah, let's get into the topic of today. I want to talk about borderline personality disorder. I feel like it's very stigmatized topic,
Hmm.
so I'm excited to get into it with you so we can kind of clear up some of that. Um, so my first question is about personality disorders in general. So,
Yeah.
what is a personality disorder and how is it different from other mental health conditions?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start this conversation because a lot of people are familiar with things like anxiety or depression. Those are two topics in mental health that come up a lot. And I think the idea that most people have around depression and anxiety is that these are problems that are really specific to one area of your life. Like maybe, for example, you have social anxiety. And so in certain types of social situations, you get really concerned about evaluation, rejection, being embarrassed, stuff like that. But it doesn't happen in all areas of your life. Uh, that is a little bit different from personality disorders, where these are problems that tend to impact a lot of areas of your life. So that's one difference. The other difference is like a lot of people think of depression as it happens only for certain periods of time, which for some people is true, for some people it's not. For some people, depression can be a longer term problem, especially if you have something like bipolar disorder. But that's a whole nother conversation. But people assume that with most forms of mental health problems that they can be they only last for a certain period of time and then they might come and go. But with a personality disorder, it's also something that tends to be a much longer term problem. So personality disorders tend to impact you in a wide variety of your life, and they impact you for a long time. The other important thing for us to mention here is personality disorders tend not to be diagnosed until you're in your adult years. And the reason for that is a lot of the things that we're probably going to talk about are not only are they more common when you're a teenager, but a lot of who you are, a lot of your identity, a lot of the stuff is still forming. It's kind of still forming into your 20s. So while people might get some of these treatments as teenagers, we're really hesitant to make any type of diagnosis about this until someone is in their at least in their 20s.
Yeah, I think I have heard about like not being able to be diagnosed until like 18 or 20, like you're saying. And I think that's really interesting. Is it because of the type of treatments and they don't want to do those treatments on younger people? Like, why is that the case?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, like, I think it has less to do with treatments. So, one area where it does have to do with treatments is the diagnosis and treatment of like not borderline, but bipolar depression. So, bipolar depression, one of the main treatments is medication treatment, and we're really hesitant towards making that kind of diagnosis when someone is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, like around those ages. One, because you want to make sure if someone is getting a medication treatment that it's exactly what they need. And at those ages, the same things that we see with bipolar disorder, it can also look very similar to ADHD, or it can look very similar uh, to unipolar depression, not bipolar depression, but the depression most people are aware of. It can look like a lot of different stuff. So with something like that, it's because of the treatment. With personality disorder, it's not because of the treatment. I think it's actually more because of the diagnosis. Because, and this might be actually where there's still I don't know if stigma is the right word, but there's a weight that a lot of people associate with personality disorders, that this is this big thing that impacts a lot of different parts of your life. It's going to be a problem for long term. And most clinicians, I think, are really cautious of making that diagnosis until they're sure of it. And, historically, it was more also because, like, your personality is changing, your identity is changing, and it's normal to experiment with your identity as a teenager, stuff like that. Now we also know that your brain continues to develop into your mid-20s. Your frontal lobe isn't fully developed until you're like 25 and stuff. A lot of your values of who you are, that stuff gets clarified like well into your late 20s. So people are still figuring stuff out, and it doesn't seem very fair to make a diagnosis about your personality until much later, until that personality is much more settled. So I think it's more because of the weight of the diagnosis, that here's this thing that you're now associated with that's a big part of who you are. I think people don't want to make that diagnosis until they're more sure of who you are.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, Jayde, if I could say
ahead.
one thing about, I think these like categories are also pretty old school. Like I think if we could start over, I don't know how much we'd be thinking about things in this way, and I don't know if personality disorders would still be called personality disorders. I mean, some of the stuff we're going to talk about kind of has challenged historically how we saw stuff, and we think about it way differently now. So these are definitely like older, more traditional ways of thinking about this stuff, and I hope 10, 20 years we'll have different categories and labels for this that kind of maybe better fit what these problems are.
Yeah, I think that's a great clarifying thing to say, because you can get so caught up in these like labels and things when at the end of the day, sometimes they don't really matter.
Yeah, one of the problems that what my dissertation was focused on was on hair pulling disorder, which is used to be called just trichotillomania, and now we call it hair pulling disorder, trichotillomania, because no one knew what trichotillomania meant. But it used to be in this so all it is you frequently pull out your hair and you have a hard time controlling that. That's the problem. It's kind of related to skin picking problems and things like that. And it used to be in the same category of problems as kleptomania, where people are stealing things frequently, or pyromania, where people are starting fires. It was in this category of things called impulse control problems, and it didn't fit that at all. It didn't fit that stuff in any way. And so just a few years ago, it got moved into what's called the obsessive compulsive spectrum of problems. So where OCD and tics and Tourette's and stuff like that fits. Not a perfect place, but much better than where it was. So, a lot of how we categorize this stuff, it's not like this is like nature's categorization. This is like a people-made categorization that has all the faults and biases and inaccuracies and slow progress that is just a part of how humans operate. So just because this is how we think of it now doesn't mean this is how we're going to be thinking about it in the future.
So you've already talked a little bit about borderline personality disorder, um, but can you talk a little more about like what specifically borderline personality disorder is and like how common it is?
Yeah, so it used to be something that we thought was super rare, and it also was something that we thought was uh, I'm going to use the words that people used to describe, which is not what I would use now, but like emotionally manipulative was how people used to think about this. And a lot of the old movie depictions of this stuff was someone who's really emotional, really unstable, and they might really be manipulative of you. And we thought this stuff was super rare. Um, and to make a long story super short, there's this person. Her name's Marsha Linehan, and she had these problems herself, and she got some really great treatments for it in the 60s and 70s, or at least I should say the best treatments at the time. And the treatments were horrible. They didn't help her in any way. She was chronically suicidal, really struggling, and she decided, you know what? I'm going to get a degree myself and I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to study this and I'm going to make a better treatment. So she ended up going on to getting her doctorate in psychology, studied this problem, and developed a really good treatment for it, which is now like the standard treatment. But through all of her work and other colleagues, other people who've also been working in this area, we got a much more better understanding of what this problem is. So, what borderline personality disorder is at the core of it, people have a hard time kind of understanding themselves. We call it identity confusion. Sometimes it can feel like it's hard to know who you are, and maybe you define yourself based upon the people around you, but as the people around you change, you're like, wait, who am I now? And so there's a lot of confusion about yourself. That I think that's actually where the original term came from, is borderline. You didn't really know where you ended and the other person started, stuff like that. So identity confusion is a big part of it. Another part of it is intense emotions. The technical term here is emotion regulation problems or emotion dysregulation. How I think about that is if your emotions are like an accelerator and brake on the car, people who have borderline personality disorder, it's much easier to press the accelerator and much harder to press the brakes. So your emotions can get activated really quickly, and then it can take a while for them to come down by themselves. That's not unique to borderline personality disorder. People who have experienced trauma also have that problem as well. And other there's other mental health problems too that have emotion regulation problems, but that's a second big one for borderline personality disorder. So confusion about yourself, emotion regulation problems, and those two things tend to make people with borderline personality disorder impulsive. And again, impulsive is this like technical term that I think it carries all this like weight to it. But what it basically means is like, yeah, it's really easy for you to press the emotional accelerator on your car, and it is hard to press that brake. So, when you get this thought of, I'm really upset, I'm going to punch the wall. A lot of people are able to say like, oh no, I shouldn't do that because that would be bad. I might hurt my hand and then I got to fix this wall. But when you have a hard time controlling your emotions, it's hard to stop that desire, that impulse, that thought, and you just might do it without thinking about it. And so people who have borderline personality disorder, they tend to get really emotional really fast, and then they might react to those emotions quickly, and then it's like, oh crap, why did I do that? And so because of that, because of all that stuff, people with borderline personality disorder also tend to have a lot of conflict with other people. It could be friends, It could be family. It could be romantic relationships. So it's all those things that work together. Confusion about who you are, difficulty regulating your emotions, difficulty dealing with your emotions might make you quick to act on those emotions, and that might lead to a lot of relationship problems in your life.
Yeah, it sounds like I feel like again, like going back to the wording we use, I feel like it's more like an emotional regulation disorder as opposed to like a personality disorder.
Yeah.
I feel like the stigma is comes from that word of borderline personality disorder.
Totally. And historically, um, back when mental health really only looked at gender in a binary way, it was historically mostly diagnosed among women. And now, as we have looked at it in this in this way, where it's just identifying what are the main problems, I've treated a lot more men, boys, non-binary people, non-female identifying people who have these problems as well. It might look a little bit different. Like, for example, one of the things that can be a big part of this is self-injury. So it doesn't mean if you engage in self-injury behavior that you have borderline personality disorder. But a lot of people who have borderline personality disorder might be at risk for injuring themselves. That is something that can look different across genders. And I see boys and men more likely to hit themselves or hit walls, hit things, do that kind of self-injury. And so it's when you look at it more broadly, it is it's the language and the way we used to understand it doesn't quite fit with where the science is now.
So diving in a little deeper, what type of treatments are recommended for people with borderline personality disorder? And are these treatments accessible to the people who need them?
Let me answer the second question first, and I'll say probably no. Because I say that with everything in mental health. There's just not enough accessibility of treatments that are out there. I'm not saying that to like really depress all of us and everyone listening, but accessibility is a huge problem in mental health, and that's a whole nother conversation. That being said, the two main ingredients for good treatment for this type of problem are treatments that address the emotions, that teach you new ways of dealing with these emotions, and focus on the relationship problem as well. The most, I should say that the best studied and most effective treatment is the treatment that Dr. Marsha Linehan, the psychologist I was mentioning before, which she developed, which is called dialectical behavior therapy. It is much more well known now. I think over the last 15 years, it's like really become very well known. There's a lot of books about it. There's a lot of like TikTok videos about DBT skills, dialectical behavior therapy skills, and I've got a few of my own favorite books. There's a book. Let me see if I think I have it here behind me somewhere. But I'll look for it if I can find it in a moment. But I'd say DBT is pretty accessible in terms of the information that's out there. But let me walk you through what the treatment looks like. So what Marsha Linehan did is, so she studied this problem, borderline personality disorder, identified these different categories of identity confusion, emotion regulation problems, impulsivity, and interpersonal conflict. And then she just looked and said, okay, what do we know in mental health addresses these problems? And all she did is she made a treatment that matches up the problems with solutions. And that's what dialectical behavior therapy became. It's a fancy word that just means helping people learn new skills that get them to a more centered place. That's a easy way to kind of describe it. The dialectical part refers to dialectics are about like relationships, so light and dark. We understand darkness because we know what light is, and we know what light is because of darkness. Or up and down, we know what's up because we know what's down, and we know what's down because of up. That's what dialectics refers to. And why that's in there is people who struggle with borderline personality disorder, people who are diagnosed with it, when you're really emotional, you might only see things one way. Like, this person is horrible, they're evil, like, they're out to get me. And you might not see the other side of it. And DBT isn't about getting you to the other side, but it's helping you to get to more middle place. A DBT therapist would describe that as a wise mind place, getting to more of the middle. So what DBT does, there's a few different skills that are related to each of these problems. So with identity confusion, it's about mindfulness. And mindfulness, I know, is also like a super trendy kind of thing that sometimes I think it's understood well, and then sometimes I'm like, no one understands what this means. Or not no one, but a lot of people might not. Mindfulness is just, it's like the pause button. It's helping you to understand what's going on inside of you, what's going on around you, and just being present with that. Not judging it, not critiquing it, just being with it. It doesn't mean you're going to feel better. It does, however, mean you're going to feel more, and you're going to be more present. So mindfulness is something for borderline personality disorder that can help you better understand who you are, what's going on inside of you, what's going on around you. It really helps with that identity confusion. Then with that emotional piece, there's a whole big set of skills in DBT that are emotion regulation skills. These are things, emotion regulation is about doing things that set you up for a good tomorrow. So emotion regulation teaches you how to have a good night of sleep, how to make sure you nourish your body, you're getting the food, the hydration you need. It teaches you a lot of the basics of like real self-care. I don't mean like a day at the spa. I mean, I love a day at the spa. It's been a while since I had one. That would be nice. But it's real self-care is like, it's like what my ancestors did, resting at night, being with the people you care about and who care about you, taking care of your body's needs, stuff like that. That's emotion regulation. And then there's a whole set of skills called distress tolerance, which is what do you do when your emotions are super high? What do you do when they're super intense? Like, how do you stop yourself from crying when you feel like you're uncontrollably crying? What do you do when you feel like you're about to have a panic attack? What do you do when you're just enraged? I mean, like really pissed off. How can you bring that stuff down? That's the distress tolerance stuff. And then there's this whole set of skills about called interpersonal effectiveness. How do you get what you need and what you deserve in your relationships? And how do you protect yourself so you're not taken advantage of? That's a lot of the interpersonal skills. So a DBT program, what it's all about is you're going to be working with a therapist who's going to help you understand these skills and is going to help you apply these skills to your life. A real full DBT program will have something called phone coaching, where when you're in an emotional crisis, you can actually call or text your therapist and they'll coach you through these skills. That part is sometimes really hard to get from a therapist from like a full DBT program. And your original question about is it accessible, I think that's the part of DBT that is least accessible. But a good DBT therapist will help you learn all of these skills. And again, there's some amazing books and resources out there about all of this. And I have one right behind me that I know I can find. Hold on, let me see if I can find it too. I feel like I need to tell your folks about this. This author has made 2 mental health books that are just like my favorites, and they're both graphic novels, or graphic novels, graphic memoirs. Ellen Forney is the author. Her last name is Forney. Her first book was called Marbles, a memoir of mood and madness, I believe is the full name of that. And that's about her life with bipolar disorder, which I know is different than what we're talking about. But one of the treatments she got to help her with that was DBT. And then she made this book called Rock Steady, Brilliant Advice from My Bipolar Life. And it's this like graphic novel instruction manual for DBT skills, basically. I think this is super accessible. It's like $20. Maybe you can get it on sale, less than that too. And it's got graphic illustrations, which I think are really great. There's a lot of great DBT workbooks out there too. A lot of DBT skills, again, on TikTok, podcasts. I've made some videos about DBT skills. So I think like learning the skills is all that stuff is out there. Sometimes it can be hard to kind of pull it in all together. So if you're not someone who has access to a therapist right now who knows these things, I would pick up a workbook or something like Rock Steady by Ellen Forney, stuff like this to kind of start learning the skills, because you can start learning these skills yourselves, and that'll at least help you get the process started. There's also a few different DBT apps out there too, some better than others, but the information is out there. The therapy is out there too, but like every therapist right now, so many are full and it can be hard to find them and hard to access them.
Great. You gave us so much information. I love DBT. I don't have borderline personality disorder, but I struggle with anxiety and panic attacks. So DBT was great, especially when I was like a teen, in helping me learn how to regulate emotions. So I love that you mentioned that book. I'm probably going to get it myself. But this is so great. We're giving the audience a lot of things that they can look into themselves.
Well, I feel the same way as you. So my very last year of training to become a psychologist, I do this thing, or I didn't do this thing. I mean, I did, but everyone does this thing who's becoming a psychologist. It's called your clinical internship. It says it's your last year, one intensive year. And the idea is you're supposed to get exposure to all the different parts of mental health that you haven't had exposure to yet. It's kind of like a residency for physicians. So my internship was really hard. I was at Bellevue Hospital in New York City, and I was working really long hours, doing a lot of tough stuff. And it's the year I started doing DBT, and I started working with people who have borderline personality disorder. And I was exhausted, not taking good care of myself. And as I was learning how to do DBT, I started applying it to my own life. And it was so good. It was so good. There's the D in DBT is dialectics, right? So a lot of things DBT therapists help you to do is understand dialectics everywhere. So like one of my therapists used to say, the only thing that comes out of a butt is poop. And so the idea is like a lot of times we say but, the truth might be more of an and. Like, for example, my internship year, I was exhausted and I was learning a lot. Like both of those things are true. And so often we get only stuck on like one part of it. Or we might say like, I really love you, but you're really annoying me. And when you say the but, you kind of like negate everything that's come before it. So it might be like, I love you, and at the same time, I'm having a really hard time being with you right now because of X. Like, both of these things are true, and I started doing that just everywhere during that year, to the point where I think I was really annoying my other interns, because I was just like, oh, and. But it's DBT is one of those things, Jayde, I wish was just taught in schools, like elementary schools, middle school. Ali could have really used a lot of DBT. My goodness. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about misconceptions. So like in your work, what are some of the like most common misconceptions you've come across about borderline personality disorder?
Manipulative is like number one. That people are intentionally saying things, being emotional, threatening, because they want to get what they want, or that they're exaggerating. Like, this is one of the things I wish everyone would just believe people when they are talking about what they're thinking and feeling. You know, like you might not agree with how someone sees the world, but it doesn't matter. That's how they see it. That's how they're feeling. Like, everyone's emotion is real. People aren't faking their emotions. And no matter who you are or what the situation is, you can validate the other person's feeling. Like, I understand you're feeling really angry right now. You might not agree with why that person's angry or that they should be angry. Doesn't matter. They're angry right now. You can validate that. So, like, the idea that people with borderline personality disorder are intentionally feeling this way to manipulate others is the biggest misconception. The reality here is people can develop borderline personality disorder for a lot of different reasons, but it's usually some and I'm never going to be able to tell you like the one thing. Even for my patients, I would never be able to tell them the one thing that's causing it, because we don't know. Mental health is complicated. It's a lot of different things that comes together. But usually for borderline personality disorder, you have developed a biology that does give you that quick accelerator and slow brake. Maybe you have a temperament that you genetically inherited that makes your emotions really quick to react, or maybe you had some early experiences. Like we know kids who experience trauma, their emotions do get they experience emotions differently. Like, their emotions are quick to react, slow to come down. So you've got this biology that does kind of rev up your emotions, and you're in an environment that doesn't fit those things very well. That's really all we talk about, is there's a bad fit between your biology and your environment. And you just haven't learned the skills that you need to kind of deal with all of that. It's not about being manipulative. It's about you trying to do the best you can given your unique biology and your unique environment and the situation you're in. One of my favorite analogies in DBT is this idea of being a third degree emotional burn victim. So this actually just recently happened to me, where I was making coffee. I just had my second child, a son, was born about 6 months ago, and I was I know, he's a cutie. He's adorable. I love him. He's our baby. I've got a 5-year-old and I've got the 6-month-old, right? And I was super sleep deprived, and I was making coffee for myself, and I usually make it in a French press, and I put in way too much coffee beans, and I like slammed it down, and all this water spilled out on my chest and my stomach, and it was like boiling hot water, and it went through my shirt, and I like burned my skin. It hurt a lot. And when you get a burn like that, it wasn't a 3rd-degree burn, but it was just I think it was just a 1st-degree burn, I think. So what happens when you get a burn, your skin is that protective layer. It protects you from the outside world. And when that top protective layer is gone, you feel things differently. And so what happened to me is when my shirt would rub against my stomach, it would hurt. When water would go on my skin, it was painful. Like the things that protect me from these small things, I felt them. And so the analogy in DBT is, imagine you're visiting someone in a hospital who has a 3rd-degree burn, and the window's open. That subtle wind that comes through is massively painful for them, but you might not experience it at all. And they might be saying like, God, it's so, close the window, I can't take it. And then you might be thinking, gosh, you're really overreacting. No, they're not. That is their reality. That is what they're feeling. So people with borderline personality disorder people think that they're being manipulative, but they're not. This is how they're feeling things. And if you could spend 5 minutes in their mind, you would feel things this way too. If you had lived their life, you would feel things this way too. So that is the number one. I see it time and again. I hear it time and again from people. They're being manipulative. Like, why? Oh, here's one. Why are they being so dramatic? I hear that a lot. They're not being dramatic. This is how they actually feel. Yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah. It really gets me going, because I'm like, no, let's believe people when they say what's going on for them, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, this has been such a great conversation. I'm like really excited about it. I have one more question. This is
Yeah.
something that I've been asking all of my guests this season, because I really want to emphasize to my audience the importance of self-care. So my question for you is, what is one thing you do each day to maintain mental wellness?
That's a really great question, and it makes me want to like binge your episodes and hear what everyone has to say about that. It's a great question. So I am someone, this was not planned, but this is a DBT skill too. I just never thought about it as a DBT skill. But I am someone who is really influenced by sound and music. Like if I listen to a really sad song, it'll make me really sad. Like I'll kind of get into it. And I'm someone who, if I'm doing work, I really need, like, my brain is always kind of trying to like listen to what's out there. Like right now I'm in Northern California and it's raining hard. And so my mind has been going to like the raindrops and stuff. And it's actually kind of distracting. But so if I'm doing work, I need instrumental music on just to like help me kind of focus. So I'm someone who's like really influenced by music. And I was just doing this this weekend. I was having a hard day. My wife was out with our daughter, and I was at home with my son, and I was just really exhausted. So I just put on some of my favorite like upbeat music and just listened to that. And I was just like dancing with him, listening to that music, and it put me in such a different mood. I always called it taking a sound bath, but like now that's a thing. That's like this like trendy thing. I think you can go take a sound bath. There's places you can go to. I just mean I turn the music up and I listen to something that helps me be in the mood I want to be in. And I've got a whole bunch of different playlists. When I was in New York City practicing full time, I had a playlist that I listened to. It was called like my You Did It playlist or Victory playlist, something like that. And it was a bunch of songs that made me feel like I just really kicked butt that day. Because I needed that music to help me transition from like a whole day of therapy and just really feeling like emotionally spent from that to like now I'm going home and I'm going to be with my family. I needed something to help me do that transition. So I had all these like victory songs that just made me feel like $1,000,000. And I do that kind of stuff all day. I have so many playlists for that kind of stuff. And it's actually a DBT skill is using sound to do mood induction. And I never really thought about it, but it's something I do every day. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've loved asking this question because I interview both like providers and survivors on this
hmm
show, so it's been really cool to like talk to providers specifically and have them share this aspect of their lives that I feel like they don't usually share. So I loved your answer.
It's cool because that works for me, but it doesn't work for my wife at all. Like she needs
Yeah.
silence. Like and that's the cool thing about mental health is it's so diverse. What works for some person might not work for someone else, and that's okay. That's totally okay. Like let's experiment, let's figure. And then the other thing is like sometimes this stuff works, and then a year or two from now it doesn't work anymore, and you got to try something else, and that's just kind of part of the process.
Exactly. All right. So my last question, as we wrap up, for myself and my audience, what are some ways that we can stay up to date with you and the work that you do?
Yeah, the easiest way is to subscribe to my YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com/@DRALI, Dr. Ali, that'll get you to me. Or you can just search for Dr. Ali on YouTube and you'll find me. I try to put out content every week, long and short, that is covering a lot of this stuff. My main jam is anxiety, but I got a lot of other interests, like we talked about today with DBT and borderline personality disorder, and I try to talk about all those things that my audience is interested in. So if you're interested in mental health and you like what I had to say, check out that stuff and you'll get a lot more of me.
All right. Thank you so, so much for being here today. This was a really great conversation. I learned so much. I know people listening are going to learn a lot. So thank you for being here and sharing so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jayde, and thanks for sparking these conversations about mental health. I think I always tell people mental health doesn't belong to professionals. It doesn't belong to therapists. It belongs to everyone. And I think we need a lot more conversations about mental health, and really appreciate you being a big part of that and kind of leading the effort here.
Today's second guest is my wonderful friend, Isabella. Isabella is a 21-year-old student studying psychology. Bella is also a mental health advocate and enjoys sharing about her mental health experiences on her social media platforms. Welcome, Bella. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm
course.
excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited. I'm so happy that we figured this out. Before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and like if you're in school and what you're working on right now?
Yeah, so I am 21 years old and I'm in college right now. I'm studying psychology. I think I want to like either be a psychologist or an eating disorder recovery coach. I have not made up my mind. But something in the psychology realm. I don't have a job right now because unfortunately I don't drive, which is a challenge I am trying to work through right now. But hopefully soon I'll get a job.
Cool. So, yeah, let's get into it. So, I know that when the last time we hung out or around the time last time we hung out is when you got your borderline personality disorder diagnosis. So can you tell us like how long you've known that you've had it, and what the process of like getting the diagnosis was like and how it made you feel when you got the diagnosis?
Yeah. So I got diagnosed when I was 18. My therapist, who I was seeing for about 6 years, had noticed it basically like since she started seeing me, like noticed the symptoms and the patterns, and she suspected I had the disorder, but they usually do not diagnose you until you turn 18. It's like very, very rare. So she waited until I turned 18, and then when I turned 18, she had mentioned it to me because I remember we were talking about, at that time I was not in a relationship, but I was dating, and I was on Tinder, and I was telling her how I was messaging this guy, and he had asked me like to tell me about myself, and I was just telling her like it was really hard because I had to like think about it. I'm like, what do I even say? Because I feel like I'm very much like, unfortunately, like I have a few mental disorders, and I feel like that's the only thing I think of when someone asks me about me, which is like sad, but like genuinely, I feel like because of all of the disorders that I have and just my mental illness in general, I feel like it's like consumed me and like my personality. I've never really felt like I've known or had a sense of myself. And she was like, I wanted, like, that kind of brings me into something I wanted to mention to you. And she was like, have you ever heard of borderline personality disorder? And I was like, I said, no, I don't think I had. And she read off all of the symptoms, and you have to have like 5 of the 9 symptoms in order to fit the criteria for it. And unfortunately, I had all 9, and she was like, yeah, that sounds, I would consider that, that you have that. So she diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder. And I remember at first when she was reading all of the symptoms off to me, and I was like, wow, you like just described me. And that was like, when she actually gave it a name, for me, labels have always kind of like, I know some people don't really like labels, but for me, they're comforting because like I have a name for it. Like I'm like, and I always kind of felt like something was wrong, like besides just like having major depressive disorder, I knew something else. It was something like there was something more, because like there was a lot more than just me having very intense depressive episodes. Like, and I always just kind of felt like, wow, there's something like this isn't normal, like how I feel and the way I think and the way I react to things. And so when she gave it a name, I was kind of like, oh wow, like personality disorder sounds pretty harsh, like pretty heavy. So I was kind of like, oh whoa. But like I think at the time it really just felt like relieving to know, like, okay, this is what it is. Like there's actually a name. I'm not just like crazy. Like I don't really believe in crazy, but you know, I felt like I was going crazy. I was like, well, what is this?
Yeah.
Like nobody's giving me, it felt like an answer. Like finally I was getting an answer to something that I was trying to figure out what was wrong.
Yeah, it sounds like a very like validating experience.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it felt that way. I know that sometimes getting a diagnosis can feel like a death sentence.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that it was like reassuring and affirming for you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it was like I think in the very beginning it was just like kind of a big relief, and like I had a name, and like I could like now like read about it and figure out where do I go from there. I think once I did more research on it on my own after I had left and got diagnosed, I've learned like over the years of now having it, like this disorder unfortunately is very demonized in society, and just people really look down on people with BPD, and I feel like we're often like labeled as monsters, and that's horrible. I don't think anybody should be referred to as that, but it's like I think that people like hear, I don't know, a celebrity with BPD, or they have one bad experience with someone with it, and then everyone else is like labeled as that, and it's, I don't know. So that part was hard to deal with, because then I learned that even like unfortunately there's some therapists that can help like manage it, but they choose not to. They don't want it. And it's like, oh wow. Like, so that part I think was hard for me, was realizing that like it is such a like demonized disorder, unfortunately, amongst other people and how they view it.
Yeah, I noticed that as well when I was like doing research for this episode, like, and just hearing experiences from people with BPD going in to get treatment and being refused because of the diagnosis. So yeah, it's pretty bad for
Yeah.
in terms of stigma right now. So going a little bit further into your BPD, so you talked about like steps you took after getting the diagnosis. You did some research on your own. Um, but can you talk about like what BPD looks like for you?
Yeah. So I feel like the best way I can like describe BPD for me anyways is feeling like my brain is like I'm not in control of it, and that like I'm living in somebody else's body who just like, and I'm watching myself do all of these things and react certain ways to things, but I can't control it because it just genuinely feels like being out of control every second of the day. So it affects me in almost every way possible. One of the things that it really impacts for me is just like how like my ability to like keep relationships, and like I feel like I'm a very kind person. Like that's one thing. Like I don't really give myself enough credit for like, I don't know, just like, or just self-respect. I feel like I need to get better at that. But one thing is I genuinely do feel like I'm a very nice person. But sometimes I feel like in relationships I can get very like, just like I hold on to things. So I'm very sensitive to people's tones of voice and people's like facial expressions and stuff. And so like, for example, like I could be talking to somebody and everything's going fine in the conversation, and then I can like their voice shifts, their tone shifts, and even if it's not like like they sound angry or something, my brain will think that they're mad at me, and then I'll start panicking. And I get this one of the symptoms of BPD is having a very intense fear of abandonment, and that's what makes it very hard for me to keep relationships, is because I always am scared that somebody's going to leave, because whether it's their voice tone changing, or they don't respond to a text as fast as they usually do, or like my boyfriend can literally text me, like he can usually respond with like okay, like to spell okay, but if he spells it like okay, my brain will instantly be like, oh, what the heck, he never says it like that, he must be mad. And then I go into panic mode thinking he's going to leave, and I'll do all of these things that to prevent him from leaving, even though it's perceived abandonment and not real, but my brain doesn't really know the difference. And so that's one thing that makes it very difficult. There's like a term with having BPD, people split. And for me, splitting, I think the best way I can describe it is it's very just black and white. My brain completely just goes into black and white thinking. And basically the example I gave with my boyfriend is a good one. Like if he responds to a text a way that he usually doesn't, I will start to panic. And then sometimes I can get mad, because then I feel like someone could just say one thing differently, and my brain will just spiral, and I can get either really angry, or I can get really, really like depressed. But it's more than just being depressed. Like, I guess the biggest thing I should have started with is suicidal ideations. Unfortunately, that is one of the criteria for BPD, and I experience it every day. And not 24/7, but I could be fine. Like nothing is wrong, and one little thing can set it off, or nothing even has to set it off, and all of a sudden I just go from being okay to not wanting to be alive anymore. And it's really difficult because I have to like it's such intense feelings of not wanting to be alive, and I have to just like fight it. And I've been trying to like figure out different ways to like deal with it. But honestly, like there's sometimes where I'm just like have to like lay on the floor and ground myself and just let it pass, because I have to like do everything in my power to hold myself from not doing anything. And I deal with it. Yeah, almost every day I get suicidal ideations. I'm so sorry. I'm all over the place. It's kind of hard to like.
No. You were making sense, definitely. I think it sounds like a lot to have to manage on a daily basis. And I guess I'm wondering, like, what support do you have with these symptoms right now, if any?
Yeah. So I'm in a program for people with BPD or PTSD. They only have people in the group with one of those diagnoses. And it's basically like I get once every other week. So like I think it's like twice a month therapy with a therapist. And we just talk about my BPD symptoms and try and work through it. And then there's the other part of the program where every Monday we have like a support group, and basically it's just for people to talk about whatever is going on in their lives. I feel like it could be more helpful for me. I think I just haven't really found the right therapist. She's nice, but I just don't feel like we click. And to be honest, I just simply need more therapy. And I think a big part of working through, or like the treatment for BPD, I feel like one of the big things is like having to do trauma work, because for a lot of people it's a trauma-based disorder and it was brought on by trauma. And for me, that's the case. And it's kind of hard to do that in like half-hour sessions every 2 weeks. Like it's just it's not really possible. And so that part I'm still trying to work out. I have been going to a DBT group too to learn the skills, because DBT was made by Marsha Linehan, who herself had borderline personality disorder, and now it's found to help with a bunch of other disorders too. But that's like the main one that you give if you have BPD. It's good to learn. So I'm trying to learn those skills. I've learned a little bit throughout my treatment for other things, but I need to refresh myself. So I'm taking this group to like, I guess it's more of a class, but they teach you the skills. So that's what I'm doing so far to help cope with it. But to be honest, like, I need a lot more. So I'm still trying to work out what I'm going to be doing to get the support I need, because it's very difficult to manage.
Yeah, and it sounds like you are very open though to the support and open to doing things to help yourself. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely open. Like I'm honestly like trying really hard to just get as much support as I can, because it's a very, very difficult disorder to live with. And like every day I'm fighting the urge to like not be alive anymore. Yeah.
So I have a couple more questions and then we're gonna wrap up. This has been so great, Bella. You're doing great, I promise. So what is like one thing that you wish more people knew about BPD?
I wish people, I guess, could like educate themselves more. I guess if I had to pick one thing, just kind of for people to know that like we're not toxic, manipulative people. Like sometimes, yes, we can do things, our actions can maybe come off as manipulative, but we're not trying to be. And as a whole, people with BPD are not manipulative people. Like we are people who have experienced a lot of trauma, and the trauma has literally rewired our brain to react and think differently than other people. People with BPD experience emotions a lot higher than the person without BPD. And so we just experience emotions really intensely. And so sometimes we act in ways that we shouldn't. And that's not to excuse, behavior that shouldn't be, but we're not evil people. We aren't monsters. We're just people who experience trauma, and now we're trying to fix trauma that has rewired our brains into now the way we think. But I think that one thing that people don't know about, or that people don't really know or think about people with BPD, is people with BPD actually are really loving people. Like, in fact, like, all of the people that I have met, like, are seriously such loving people. Like, we have really, really big hearts, and we're actually, like, able to give, because we're able to feel emotions more intensely, we're able to give very intense love for people. And I think that's not that I think there's a plus to having BPD, because it is just a very horrible disorder to live with, but that is one quote-unquote bright side to it, that I think people don't really look at people and think that.
Yeah, I love that. So my last question, I ask everyone this question because I want to put an emphasis this season on the importance of self-care. So what is one thing that you do every day or every week to maintain mental wellness?
I think I allow myself time to just rest. And usually that consists of just kind of me laying in my bed and listening to music that makes me happy. That's probably the biggest thing. I love music, and it's very therapeutic. But I think just giving myself time to rest. I feel like a lot of people don't ever just let themselves rest, or they feel like they have to earn rest. And that's not true. Like, you just need to rest. Like, everybody deserves rest. Yeah.
Love that. I freaking love rest. I'm a rest advocate. Love it. All right.
Yeah.
So that's it. Thank you so much for being here today. I think we covered a lot, and I think a lot of people can learn from what you talked about today. So thank you so much, Bella, for being on here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And again, I'm sorry. I hope that I got my thought process of like what I was trying to say came out and it made sense.
No, you made sense, I promise. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Students of Mind. I want to say thank you to Dr. Ali and Isabella for being on the show. These were really interesting conversations to have, and I really appreciate both guests' openness. Be sure to check out the description to see how you can follow and stay up to date with them. As always, social links for the Students of Mind team are listed in the description as well. If you have a moment, please leave a rating and review for the show. You can do so by going to the bottom of the show page on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or by using an app like Podchaser. Thank you again for listening to this episode. I hope you learned something new or resonated with something you heard today, and I will see you next episode.